Good morning, and you're all very welcome to this AIB Business Leaders Live event, where this morning we'll be talking about unlocking potential through digital. There's no doubt that it has been an extraordinary time for businesses, both large and small, and we've all heard stories about how versatile and resilient companies have been in order to respond to the challenges over the last 20 months. But we've also heard stories about how digitalization has impacted their businesses, has opened up new opportunities, and some companies have taken to digitalization at incredible speed and managed it very well. And the wider impacts of all of that are the things that we're going to talk about today. And it's great to have an opportunity to put experts together with small businesses who are AIB customers to talk about their experience and their views about what things might look like in the future. So I'm looking forward to that. But before we start, I'm delighted to welcome Fergal Coburn, who is Chief Technology Officer with AIB, to make some opening remarks. Fergal.
Thanks, Richard, and good morning, everybody. On behalf of AIB, I'd like to welcome you to this morning's event, which is focused on unlocking potential through digital. AIB provides banking and financial services to almost 250,000 Irish businesses today. Nearly 3/4 of those businesses are worried and concerned about establishing and growing their online presence. Things like data security, privacy, losing the personal connection with their customers, the cost of investment in technology, particularly for small businesses who may need significant capital investment, and growing and retaining the digital skills required to make their business successful. These are very real and serious concerns for small business. And we can see in our 250,000 customers, nearly half of them have had specific investments in communications and digital technology over the last year. So against that context, we're delighted to be able to bring you together today with experts and thought leaders in this industry across e-commerce, cybersecurity, and the future of work. So with that, I'll hand back to you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Fergal. And Fergal will be joining us on the first panel of this morning's event, which is about e-commerce, which we'll be going to very shortly. So we'll begin with a panel discussion on e-commerce. We'll take a 5-minute break at the end of that, and we'll then have our second panel discussion, which will deal with the area of cybersecurity. We'll take a short break at the end of that, and then we'll move on to the future of work and remote working and what the potential of all of that might be and what it holds and what the future might look like. So we'll move to e-commerce. And I'm delighted to welcome Carl Lilrud, who is a best-selling author and entrepreneur. He's helped over 1,000 e-commerce stores to increase their conversion and to achieve market growth. Fergal from AIB will be staying with us. And we're also joined by Anthony Gallagher, who is Managing Director of PetStop, which has had an extraordinary journey through COVID. And he's going to tell us a little bit about how he managed it, how things have changed and the opportunities that that has brought. So I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you. But first, Carl Lilrud, if I could go to you. If you were to try and sum up what are the greatest shifts and trends that you've seen in the world of e-commerce and retail in the last 18 months, what would you say?
So the greatest thing that we have seen is that companies actually start to care on a totally new level about customers, and that customers have a need or an expectation that they want to be able to shop effortless. And that is the biggest change that is connected to COVID and new consumer behavior.
One of the things when you talk about customer experience and customer focus, traditional retail businesses might well have prided themselves on their customer service. And if they haven't fully made the changeover to e-commerce, and maybe they've been forced to try and do that during COVID, they might have come from a perspective where it's actually more difficult to achieve higher levels of customer service because you're not face-to-face with your customers.
Yeah, definitely. So classic retail have undergone a great shift and change as well, because obviously stores have been closed and they have tried to find other ways to interact with their customers. And as stores have opened up gradually, we can also see that stores had to transform to new regulations and so on, which both put a strain on them, but also enable them to work closer with their customer base and actually communicate with them on a new level. So I think that all companies have learned very much about how to interact with customers and what customers expect and need for them to be happy. And this is something that I have been talking about for many years, that what we have seen online is that it's not been customer driven, it's not been data driven, it's been solution driven, and technology have basically defined the playing ground, so to say. And what we see here and now is that all companies have tried to make giant leaps forward in how to basically be there with the customer, save time and make it easier for the customer.
And just on that point, Carl, is that a matter of the technology getting better, or businesses changing their mindsets about how they approach the technology?
In the beginning, if we look at this from a COVID perspective, in the beginning, all businesses were scared of what was going on. How will this affect us? And then we could see quite soon that e-commerce had a positive effect. And quite soon after that experience, many e-commerce companies felt that, okay, so we are skyrocketing. Things are going crazy. And that means that we can't take care of our customers in a good way because we have more orders, we have more requests or conversations with our customers, which we can't cater for. We have this big strain on our organization, and at the same time, we have this other challenge called COVID that we need to cope with in one way or another. So this had enabled companies or forced companies to really think about how to be more efficient and how to be more closer with the customer, to actually see, okay, so we have these 10 issues that we need to sort out, but what out of these 10 is it that actually will cause the greatest positive experience for our customers? Because with more customers, with a higher amount of traffic, and with this new level of interest from a customer base, I mean, if you go from 100 orders to 3,000 orders per day, that's a huge strain on the organization. But also, the customers expect that you treat them in the best possible way. And many of these customers are new customers, which are even more important in terms of creating that first impression, that long-lasting feeling that you're seen and you're part of the company's greatest interest.
I want to bring in Anthony Gallagher here. Anthony, perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about PetStop, particularly PetStop before COVID, what the business looked like, and then a little bit about how you responded to the challenges of COVID.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Our business, we have 8 sort of large format pet stores around the country. And, you know, e-commerce was about 10% of our business prior to COVID. And we always pride ourselves on, you know, excellent customer service, face-to-face interaction with our customers, trying to, you know, improve dwell time, having a bit of theater in store, et cetera, et cetera. So really trying to focus on giving the best service we could to pets and their pet parents. And we, you know, we welcome people to bring their dogs in store. We had some big, large aquariums, some big animal house where people could come in, browse, look at the animals, people could bring their children in. So it was all pretty much geared around the customer. And the online business, while it was important, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't the mainstay of our business. But we had started to invest in that probably from the 4 years prior to COVID. And we had been building it up and building it up. And then really, once COVID happened, everything changed. We were then trying to sort of, on the retail side of things, discourage people from coming in and browsing, discourage any interaction with the staff. We took away all of our displays of animals. We closed down our grooming parlors. We closed down our aquariums because we then were trying to focus on what do you need, what is essential, and that's what we're trying to do. So that was sort of on the retail side. And then I suppose around the 12th or 13th of March last year, once the panic started to set in about, retail going to close down and the panic buying, our online sales went from roughly 150 a day up to 1,500. I mean, overnight, literally.
And how were you geared, Anthony, to be able to cope with that initially, vis-a-vis the technology, the backup service to make all of that happen? Was that a real shock to the system?
Yeah, I mean, it was a massive shock. We were lucky in that we had the technology was there in terms of the website, etc., had the capability to sort of take in the orders, process them, do all that. And I suppose really the key driver behind how we managed to sort of cope with the immediate increase in orders was our staff. Simple as that. So, our sales in our stores after sort of around the 27th of March, once that happened, I mean, our store managers, our people in head office, everybody by themselves, it was a bottom-up revolution in this business. They said, right, we're just going to have to go into online. We're going to have to pick orders. So we changed our shift pattern. People started coming in at 6 in the morning and working until 4 in the afternoon. People started coming in at 5 and working until 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, whatever was needed. So if we got an order in that day, we made sure we got it out. I mean, no matter what had to happen, we absolutely had to stay on top of our orders. We knew that was key. Now,
and Anthony, just on that point, the scale of the increase there, I mean, you would have had online targets, for example, before COVID. How quickly were they met or exceeded?
I mean, literally, Richard, within the first day, I mean, the whole change, I mean, it brought us 3 to 5 years ahead of where we thought we would be. Definitely 3 years. And that was that happened instantly. And we were operating out of one of our stores. So we didn't have a big logistics center or anything like that. At that point, we had some external warehousing, but it wasn't suitable for pick and pack. So we literally, we were operating a store and we were also then picking for online, all from the same store.
Okay.
So it was crazy.
And we're going to come back to what you've done since then and where you see it going. But I want to bring in Fergal here. Fergal, in relation to AIB, what has all of that looked like for you as a bank and as catering for business customers who were dealing with some of these issues?
So it's really remarkable to listen to Anthony there and the disruption he has experienced. And as Anthony was talking through the 150 orders going up to 1,500 orders in a day, I was thinking about AIB. Cash leaving our machines has dropped by 40%. That is 10 years of movement in 1 year. In AIB, our mobile banking app, how we interact with our customers, how we deliver our products and services every day. Customers interact 2 million times with us through our app now every day. In our branch network, it's about 10,000 transactions per day across the whole branch network. So our mobile app is like 200 branch networks. So the shift of transaction in such a dramatic space has been dramatic for our business. At the same time, AIB Bank, Anthony talked about the 12th, 13th of March, we had nearly 10,000 staff. 6 weeks later, we had 8,000 staff operating remotely from their own homes. Huge disruption causing, and Anthony's description there, we've seen it in SMEs across our base. What I have to say is heroic response to a dramatic environment, to dramatic disruption. But really, heroic response isn't sustainable. We can't all be heroes every day. It requires us to move to a new sustainable playing field that is enabled with technology, enabled with the best practice, enabled with experience. So I think that's the big thing we're discovering in AIB. Every aspect of our business now has to be digitized on a sustainable basis. And the key thing for us now is, what is the future customer experience? So Anthony described there his customers, the in-store, the fantastic in-store services, how he shut them down at the beginning of the pandemic. That's massive disruption to what Anthony and his team, the thought they put into the customer experience. Now that has to be reinvented in this new world. So that's the exact same problem for AIB, and I think it faces every business now.
And from an AIB point of view, in terms of the response that you did and what you have brought to the market and what you've brought to bear as a company to deal with e-commerce and those challenges, what are the kinds of things you've dealt with?
So some specific examples. What would SMEs expect us to do as a bank to help them? So if you think one key primary function we perform in the economy is the movement of value. Consumers make payments, businesses sell goods and receive payments. So in between there's a new body of data and information. As people have moved away from cash, it's now all digital electronic payments. SMEs do not have analytics departments, they do not have data scientists, they don't have time to understand what's happening. So we've really focused on that, and we've taken, through our partner AIB Merchant Services and Fiserv, the global leader in payments technology, we have brought a new solution into the market in the last few months to empower and accelerate small business and tell them about their business. In effect, we're their analytics horsepower. A solution called Main Street Insights. So if you Google Main Street Insights, watch a 4-minute video, there is nothing else like this in the market, actually in the world today, where we are informing and educating businesses about their business performance, about their customers, about their competitors, about their local geography. This is a unique capability that we're creating. So that's one example. Another very specific example, maybe more holistically, we focus in expertise in our people. AIB's business banking corporate teams, remember now, we bank 250,000 businesses in Ireland. We have access to a wealth of information of best practice and best solutions. So really building expertise in every sector has been a key primary focus of how we've responded.
On the question of expertise there, Carl, I think many businesses would feel that, particularly small businesses, that the e-commerce experience, the e-commerce opportunity might well be hoovered up by big business. And it's difficult for them as smaller companies to really maximize that opportunity and to compete. How do you see that? Do you go along with that? Or do you think that smaller retailers, for example, can really compete effectively on an e-commerce platform?
That's a really interesting question, because the world doesn't work in the same way. I mean, different regions of the world operate in different ways. Customer groups have different expectations. Like if we look at Asia, for example, over there, the brand store, as it's called, is almost non-existing. It's e-commerce is driven like an endless shopping mall. While in Europe, brand stores are quite common, and in some countries they are much more common than in other countries, especially where we see that big players like Amazon have not taken over. In those countries, we can see that brand stores shopping is much more intense. But what we can see post-COVID is a very interesting thing going on. And that is that store to customer, where we have the brand selling directly to the customer, is actually going up, because some of these new companies are growing in a different kind of way. They have connected themselves in smart methods to influencers, and they build their entire revenue stream connected to this individual and how this individual is pushing that brand forward. So it depends on what type of product and what type of customer we're looking at. Some customers are always bargain hunting, and they want to make sure that they find the best price at all time. They are not sticking to one supplier, while many other customers are sticking to a supplier or one company because they have built up trust. They understand that things will be delivered on time during using their preferred delivery method, even though they might be living in a place where some other delivery companies have a hard time finding their way, and so on. So it's interesting because there is not one answer to this question. And the simple answer is that you need to make sure that you understand your customer base. You need to understand what they expect from you before they communicate that expectation.
You mentioned there about different regions, different areas, continents even. From an SME perspective, what kind of interesting patterns or trends have you seen in other parts of the world that might be relevant or might be interesting for SMEs here who are at a certain point in their journey towards digitalization, towards e-commerce?
Yeah, so one thing that's growing, and which will be growing even more post-pandemic and for the future, is that what we have seen in the past, and we can go way back, is that customers want to be feeling that they are catered for, that that the company care about the customer. And the new movement that we see is growing very fast is video shopping, where the customer actually see the individual that they are communicating with, and that individual holds up the item and show, this is the package of banana that you are about to buy. Do you want this, or do you want me to get another one over my shoulder? Okay, let's get this one. Does this look better to you? And that is something that is going to be really interesting, because that gives us a level of retail online.
Interesting. Anthony, you were talking about the challenges, very short-term and immediate challenges that you faced, good challenges because you had to transform that online business. Where is the business at now in terms of that online versus bricks and mortar mix, and how have you invested in online during the last 20 months?
Yeah, so I suppose the online, once the stores, and right through the pandemic, because we're an essential service providing food and supplies for animals. So once the sort of stores reopened again, as in our neighbours, because in some cases we were the only store open, us and maybe Boots in certain retail parks. So once the stores reopened, online came back a little bit. It's still on, still at maybe 1,000 to 1,500 orders a day, depending on the day. It's still very, very strong and still growing. But it's now accounts for about a third of our sales, because our store sales increased as well, because there was a bit of a boom in the whole sort of pet thing when people were at home, decided to get a dog or a cat or a fish or a small animal. So the whole pet market has had a bit of a boom, and people have sort of decided to shop local with retailers like ourselves, and also specialist retailers with sort of bigger range of products and higher quality products really for their pets. So that's what happened in terms of the relationship between the rate of sale online and in store. And then what we did ourselves as a business, we had always planned to move to a new warehouse, which was a bespoke for pick and pack, but that accelerated by about 18 months. So literally we had to push the button, find a warehouse, get it set up, get it ready to rock. And we did that. We moved in October 2020, just before the second lockdown. And we weren't ready, and it was chaos, and it was very challenging, and most of the team didn't want to move, but we did, and thank God we did, because we would have been under even more severe pressure. But it meant we moved to a 45,000 square foot distribution center where we can have a bespoke pick and pack operation. And we were building it as we were fulfilling orders. But again, due to the hard work of the team of people in PetStop, my friends, my colleagues, they made it work.
Okay. And I want to talk about, we'll come to the future in a moment for all three of you in terms of what you think the future might look like. But Anthony, one of the things that strikes me, a business like yours, somebody wants to buy dog food. They go into an actual store, and there are all these other things. There might be doggy toys, other things that are there in front of them. They say, an impulse purchase, I think I'll buy one of them. It's not what I came in for. I was thinking about an e-commerce point of view and how you maximize those impulse purchases. And I went on to your website this morning, and up front and center, I noticed were all these doggy coats and raincoats and bandanas and all these kind of impulse buys. So in a way, you've managed to replicate the in-store experience and capturing the impulse purchase online.
Yeah, and it's something that we try to pride ourselves on, is trying to sort of offer our sort of our in-store service to our online customers. So all the staff that work in the online department, especially customer service, that are customer facing online, have all come from the stores. They've all worked in stores. They all are used to dealing with customers. So we still have a lot of people that ring us up and give us orders over the phone, which we then put through the website. Or somebody has a problem with their order, we're on the phone and we say, look, what can we do? Something has gone astray, or we don't have the black coat, we have the red one. So we still try to keep it as a very personal experience. And we do have if you're buying something, we will show on the website, you like a bag of Royal Canin, well, for Labrador, well, what about these coats? These are ones that a Labrador might wear. But the big change that we're about to re-platform, and we're about to move forward in that regard. And really, it's about personalization and getting closer to the customer and understanding what type of pet they have, what type of products that they would normally, have, what can we offer them. And it really, to me, it's a full circle in terms of retail, because when I grew up in Sligo, our local butcher knew Mrs. Gallagher, what she wanted we'd ring her up, and so either delivery man would come out with the stuff on his bicycle, but he knew what Mrs. Gallagher was going to get, every literally 2 or 3 times a week. And that's where I see us getting to. We want to know what Richard Kern is going to order, what type of dog Richard Kern has, how old is he, what type of food does he have, what do we think Richard would like, when is Richard's dog's birthday, etc. So we can send him a card. So it is about getting as close and personal, and that's where SMEs can really thrive, by giving the personal service online or offline.
And Carl, it's an interesting point there about knowing the customer and knowing what type of dog they have if you're in the pet stop business. But Anthony makes an interesting point there about staffing, and anyone who's working in the online part has had experience in working in the traditional retail part. Is that something that we might see disappear in years to come, that people will become online retail specialists and they won't have that grounding that they may have got through the traditional store?
Yeah, definitely. And this understanding of the business has a risk of disappearing step by step as we are moving more and more to online transactions, and as we hire new employees that have never been working in a store, and potentially if we fast track this, maybe they don't even understand the concept of buying in a store, because it's a younger generation that basically is born with a cell phone in their hand and have been doing all their transactions and all their news reading and everything using this mobile device. So they don't really have the personal understanding of what to expect from interacting with a physical store. But also this younger generation has a high demand on the environmental facts that we as companies need to deliver on to be relevant to this customer group. So it's going to be really interesting in this shift, because it's going to be a challenge. But what we're talking about right now is that the challenge is that we want to keep the old alive, so to say. And what we should be thinking about is, okay, we have this experience from the past. How can we modernize this without losing track of the essence, the things that we believe is doing the greatest difference? so that it's fit for the future. Because the younger generations have different expectations than the older generation had, because the world is different.
Fergal, one of the great unknown questions about all of this we saw with the pandemic, the acceleration of online sales. In some cases, that whole e-commerce process advanced years in a matter of months. And the big unknown is, where will that fall now? And where is it going to fall in the short term and the medium term? As a bank, you guys see payments and card payments and how people are paying for things. Do you have a sense as to, is the online surge that we saw sticking? How much is it sticking, and how much is there a drift back to traditional?
Yeah, so really interesting question, Richard. I don't have a crystal ball. There's a big unknown for us in many lines of business. We're not quite sure where it's going to go back to. A lot of us miss the personal touch and miss the interaction and miss the in-store experience. We know before COVID, there was general trends in the industry, a drift towards online, a drift towards digital. Where the plateau was going to be, we don't know. COVID accelerated an adoption of digital and online behaviours. Actually, very promisingly, in the Irish economy in the last couple of months, we've seen a huge return of significant volumes. The balance between online and offline is significantly leaning towards online, but the volumes are coming back very strongly, which is a really positive message. But really, in the economy, drastic changes have happened through acceleration. There's major forces on the demand side coming from customers. Customers are now these hyper-connected, hyper-informed, ever-growing expectations Carl touched on. Good service today is bad service tomorrow because expectations are growing. Then on the supply side, the technology we're all using, the collaboration technology, the mobility, the data, the analytics, that's empowering businesses and consumers to engage. So that information asymmetry, that advantage buyers had over sellers, is plateauing. In between those two supply and demand forces is business. Business has to digitize everything. Data and analytics, big data has to be brought together. That's going to happen in the short term. Heroic activities from small business will become mainstream as business get more and more digitized. So when you look into the future, Richard, and you think about what your customer is going to be, no matter what business you're in, what is your customer going to be in the future, and how are you going to meet their needs? And we can see increasingly, human needs are very holistic things that it takes more than one business to meet. So as a small business, are you going to be consumed as part of a wider proposition to customers, or are you going to consume? Who are you going to partner with? What ecosystem of providers are you going to play in? So really thinking about your customer journey in the future for your product or service, I think is critical at this point for businesses.
Carl, when we look at the psychology and consumers in relation to this, and we talk about the future, to give my own personal experience, I'm not a typical 20-something consumer. I'm in my 50s now. And prior to COVID, I bought some things online, and there are other things I never bought online. I never bought clothing online. I've now started buying ink for my printer online, which is something I should always have bought online. I did it during COVID. I'll probably never go back to buying it in a traditional store again. Clothing that I bought online, didn't fit, didn't like it. I don't think I'm going to buy clothing online anymore. How typical or untypical is that? And how does this psychology affect planning for future growth and the potential of e-commerce?
Yes, definitely. What you're explaining is that we have seen how there's been a huge shift from retail to online commerce. But that's logical, because half of the world or more have been locked in during different periods of the last couple of months. So it's been logical that e-commerce have been growing like crazy. And what we see now as the world opens up again is that customers will like to socialize again, and one level of socializing will be shopping in physical stores. And that means that the customers will be moving back, but the behavior have already been implemented, meaning that we have a new set of understanding. We have a new set of expectations that we are living our lives by. We know how easy it is, and we as the full age group between like teenagers up to people that living in homes and basically are afraid of leaving. All of us have new set of tools, and those tools are that we can actually buy almost anything online today. Maybe sending the car to repair might be a problem, but we can order the repairman to be sent to our house. So the world of e-commerce have evolved quite much, because it's not just buying this thing online, it's also buying services, but these services might even be delivered to your house. So what we can see is that it's been evolving very, very fast, and there's great things to learn from it. Some of these things might be moving back because customers have a certain level of interest in communicating with people. But it's also up to the companies to deliver that possibility using new technology.
Anthony, what does the future look like for you and PetStop? Where do you see that mix? You mentioned 30% now online. Where do you see that ball falling?
I mean, I think we're going to, double our online sales again in the next 2 years. Our plan is to double our sales in the next 2 to 3 years globally. So, up to about 50 to 60 million a year. And then, effectively over the next 3 years. So within the next, I would say 5 to 6 years, we would hope to be doing about 100 million. 50 million of that would be online, and the other 50 will be through bricks and mortar. Effectively, it's about enabling both our retail stores, which have a limitation to number of SKUs that they can get, number of products that they can have. So we typically carry, in a 5,000 square foot store, we carry 5,000 products. In a 10,000 square foot store, we carry 10,000 products. But our online offering is between 13 and 15,000 and increasing. So our plan now is to offer in-store experience, the full range of products online in-store. So you can come in to a PetStop store in the near future, in the next number of weeks. And, if we don't have it there, you can order it from, like the McDonald's tablet that they have, where you can order your Big Mac, whatever. You can go on and say, right, I want a bed for a Great Dane, and I want it to, have black on the inside and white on the outside. We don't have it in store, but that can be delivered to your house the next day, or it can be delivered to the store that day for click and collect. And our click and collect is instant, so it is alive. So generally, if you order something on our website through click and collect, you can generally collect it within an hour, maybe less, provided it's in store. And you will get so it's not something you order the click and collect, it's got to come from the central warehouse. Generally, those products are in store. That's number one. And I think number two then is trying to offer a bigger range of sort of locally sourced and produced products. Our buying team are now focused on manufacturing products in Ireland, especially dog food, cat food, treats, etc., and bringing sort of the best that Ireland has, the food island, to the pets of Ireland. And through that, we've had a number of acquisitions. We bought a small treat plant, so we're going to have a vertical integration there. But we're partnering with a lot of small companies, trying to give them access to market, to sort of a bigger consumer base. So really, it's about trying to get close to the customer, but expanding the opportunity that we have, in a quite an aggressive way, really.
Okay. And we've talked a little bit about future and future trends. Fergal, if there are companies out there, small businesses that have dipped their toe in the water in relation to e-commerce during COVID, others have progressed it a bit further. Others maybe they've been under so much pressure, they felt that they weren't able to progress it fully. Is there any, from your experience in dealing with so many small businesses, any advice that you could give to small businesses who are at that early stage?
Well, I'd say the first thing I'd say, the research I quoted at the start of the session, where 73% of small businesses are worried and concerned around entering or growing into the online space, it's okay to be worried. And I'd say turn that worry into something positive. And I think the resilience shown by small businesses, how they respond, and every time there's a lockdown, how they've pivoted, it has been heroic. Take that heroic appetite, take that appetite for success. Don't take risks. Look around you. There's innovation now that's happening all across industry in every sector that's proven. Go with proven innovation. Talk to experts. I talked about the sector teams in AIB. We see it emerging. We have a great sense of what works and what doesn't work. You know, the fear factor is normal, okay? And I think Irish businesses have proven what they can do when they're afraid. And I think that, so having a confidence thing to go out there, but do realize you do have to go out there. Everything is getting digitized. Every customer experience needs to be rethought. How you're delivering your product to market, how you're understanding your customer needs, how you're iterating your products and services, how you're connecting, that personal connection. You know, that personal connection is never going to go away. Even in our branch network, where cash is no longer really a requirement for many of our customers, the sales and advisory, the interaction, the knowledge transfer is critical. And that's why it's core to AIB's strategy to stay in the community, because people need access to knowledge and expertise. So I'd say, for small businesses concerned, stop being concerned.
Okay. Carl, what about you? What about small businesses that are maybe still at a very early stage in relation to e-commerce and online? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, so it's a difficult time for sure, because what we see right now is that there's a change in market again as businesses open up. But quite soon we will see that the life that we were used to post or pre-COVID will not be the same post-COVID. So as people get back to retail, they feel happy about being back, but soon we will see that many of these people actually realize that, okay, but I saved so much time. So I want to be able to go to brick and mortar stores and socialize during my shopping experience, but I still want to save more time, just like I did when I was working from home. So we will see a shift back to retail, and then not a full shift back to e-commerce again, but definitely that many people see that, okay, so now I need to get back on track and optimize my life and optimize my time being spent.
But if you follow, Carl, the logic of that, and if that's the way it plays, what does the future of retail look like? You know, what does that mean for city centres, for our towns, whereby if online really does take over to that extent, what does it look like?
Definitely it's going to be a challenge, for sure. And that means that retail can't think that they will survive if they keep on working as they did before. They need to become more future commerce, not just omni-channel, but think about, okay, so how will we interact with our customers? How will we get the customers interested in getting back to the store? What level of engagement can we give to them in the store that is different from before, but also deliver on the new generation's expectations? So what is it that we can do to really create that feeling of welcomeness, but also basically delivering on a return on investment, if we look at time as an investment? So we need to think more about how the store experience should deliver on these requirements. We need to be more creative, because retail will not be as retail was. Retail will be something new, definitely. And that connects to the things that we again can see that Asia is building on there, where they have the video shopping is becoming a channel that is very, very, very efficient, but also that the store attendants online, the people that meet you online from the store is becoming superstars. They are becoming the next generation of influencers. So this is something that retail can be playing on, and there's an opportunity there that we can build on.
Anthony, it seems you're going to have to get the video out and do a few videos yourself there. You could become a superstar. If you had a bit of advice for a business, an SME, that's not as far down this road as you are, what advice would you give them?
I think don't overthink it. Look at what are your best sellers, what makes your business unique. Why do the customers come to you in the first place? So pick those out. Don't try to be all things to everybody. Just pick out your winners, your heroes. And if you're very small, I see some of the clothing stores, etc., have offered this video service already. Where Louis Copeland or something like that, they might know your size already, so they're going to send you the products that are going to fit you. You can be confident of that. We're partnering with another company called PetFix, where we will hopefully be offering video vet, where effectively we can do diagnostics for your pet. That's in the near future. But we also are in the process of developing about 200 videos to show people, how to put a harness on a dog, how to measure your dog for, a dog coat for the winter, what type of food is best for a puppy, etc., etc. And then it will be trying to create those heroes, those in-store heroes. It definitely won't be me, Richard. I've got a face for radio and not for TV. So it will be some of the other 200 staff that we have who are a lot more articulate and a lot more knowledgeable than me in terms of how to answer questions and support customers. But yeah, I think it's play to your strengths. What were you good at before this? And okay, get out there and sell that to your consumers, sell that to your community.
Okay, great. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to wrap up the session at this point, and I want to thank Fergal Coburn of AIB, Carl Lilrud, and also Anthony Gallagher, Managing Director of PetStop. We'll take a break and we'll be back with our second panel discussion on cybersecurity in a few moments' time. Thank you. Welcome back to this AIB Business Leaders Live event. We were talking before the break there about e-commerce, and we have a poll result in. We had a question there for you. Has your business experienced the pressures of having to develop an online presence? And 40% of you said yes, 60% said no. And it's interesting, depending on the sector mix and the kind of businesses that you have. Nevertheless, nearly half of you online here this morning have experienced that pressure. Well, talking about e-commerce, it's about moving transactions online, money going back and forth online, and inevitably there are issues about security and about data and cybersecurity, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about next. I'm delighted to be joined by our panelists, which is made up of Professor Kieran Martin, and he is founding CEO of the National Cybersecurity Centre, and he's also a professor at the University of Oxford. We're also joined by Troy Armour, who's Group Chief Executive Officer at Trojan Technologies, and Peter O'Connor, who's Data Security and Governance Consultant with Assistech. So you're all very welcome this morning. Kieran Martin, if I could go to you first, to what extent is cybersecurity not just a growing problem, but an evolving problem in the issues and the risks that it's posing for businesses?
Well, thanks for having me, Richard. Good to be here. It is both a growing problem and an evolving problem, but my message would be don't panic, nor should you be complacent. The businesses watching this will be sophisticated organizations that are used to dealing with risk, and that's how they should think about this problem. We have sort of catastrophized and glamorized cybersecurity in a quite an unhelpful way. I'm old enough to remember the 1984 film War Games starring Matthew Broderick, where a teenager in a Chicago suburban bedroom hacks into the Pentagon and almost starts a nuclear war by guessing a password. And it doesn't really work like that. And sometimes we don't help ourselves by sort of depicting cybersecurity as these maps of the world with lines firing across each other and so forth, and making it sound like there's this constant digital battle that you can do nothing about. What we're actually dealing with is structural and systemic insecurity in the technology we've come to depend on. There's a great line by a man called Dr. Vinton Cerf, who was one of the godfathers of the internet and pioneer at Google. He's now in his 70s, but in reflective mode, he said, when we were building the modern internet, we didn't think enough about the people who would try to break it. Everything was about free and open connectivity. And so we built this structure based on access to free services by giving away data, which turns out wasn't very good for security, and it's full of ordinary vulnerabilities. And there are two groups of people that are exploiting that. There are transnational, mostly based outside the West, because Western law enforcement would get them, but organized criminals. And there are nation states. And so if you look at, obviously in Ireland this year, the attack on the health services executive has been the major talking point, hugely disruptive, very damaging, very distressing for so many people. But that type of criminal attack, that ransomware attack, was happening quite a lot all over the world, particularly in wealthier countries, but just less visibly. They were extorting business leaders quietly for large amounts of money. They were disrupting in ways that couldn't be seen. They were maybe causing inconvenience with email and flows of business, but they weren't disrupting services as such. And that's the sort of thing that's been happening. The large-scale theft of data by criminals, because it's monetizable on the so-called dark web. Every business is at risk of that, and many individuals are as well. So that's the bad news. There are also sort of nation-state threats. They tend to be more targeted. So China has been after intellectual property for a long time, so they can skip research cycles. Russia, Iran, and North Korea tend to act for more political reasons. So the average business has less reason to fear that, but strategically important businesses might. But the better news, particularly on the criminal side, because it is the criminal risk that can really damage businesses. It is unlikely, though not unknown, for it to be catastrophic in war games style. It is much more likely to be chronic, invidious harm that undermines the confidence of your customers, the confidence of citizens in digital transactions, the sort of thing you were talking about in the last session about building businesses. But whilst some of the nation states can deploy really elite capabilities, criminals are just trying to find any old weakness that they can exploit. And if you're a bit stronger, they'll go somewhere else. It really is that sort of evolutionary law of the jungle sometimes.
And what, Kieran, what can that look like? If I'm sitting and I'm running a business down the country in Ballahadreen somewhere, and I'm thinking that North Korea and China and the Pentagon is all a long way from me. If things go wrong, what can that look like?
Well, it could look like, as it did for the health services executive, you wake up one day and your systems don't work, and there's a ransom demand saying you won't be able to work this and we'll leak all your data. That's one way it can look like. It can look like someone in authority from the Gardaí or the Irish National Cybersecurity Centre saying huge amount of your customer data is on the dark web. That's a serious data protection violation. You can expect regulatory enforcement. And so on. It could be you've developed a really sophisticated piece of intellectual property that you're hoping to patent, and you find that the Chinese have walked out with it. Some of the protections, though, what do they look like and what do they guard against? I'll give you one example, and then we should obviously let others in. But this multi-factor authentication thing that annoys lots of people because it's a little bit less convenient than not having it. Right. Any attacker of any competence can do what they call a brute force attack, just mass password guessing and all the rest of it, just overwhelm so much and guess so much that you're going to get in somewhere. Multi-factor authentication is a bit like a vaccine. It doesn't eliminate that risk, but it greatly reduces it, and it makes the disease work an awful lot harder. So what I'm trying to do is sort of desensationalize this problem. That little thing about, having a secondary factor, whether it's a text message and so on, can actually it certainly makes criminals. It even makes the Russian state or the Chinese elite hackers looking for your precious patent. It makes them work a lot harder. And if they have to work a lot harder, they can do less of it. So I want to give an optimistic message. There's real harm here. Businesses are suffering in small but strategically significant ways when you add it all up, but there's stuff we can do about it.
Okay. Troy Armour, if you could just tell us a little bit about your business, Trojan Technologies, what you do and what kind of service you provide to clients, and just from a cybersecurity point of view as well.
So, Richard, I've been providing technology services from the northwest of Ireland for about 25 years. Got into the business with this kind of idea to bring enterprise class services to SMEs, which would include the cybersecurity bit. So a lot of my clients would have very strong ring-fenced systems, even which have grown with them and with the various threats that are out there over the last 20 years. And I suppose the biggest thing that we are looking at now in regards to cybersecurity is, for us, the biggest weakness in it is the people involved. And so part of the last, 24 months have been really around getting companies to see, the education of their people. And I think in a way, Irish people have a weakness in that we're so welcoming to people. It's one of the biggest things that we have is the smile and how are you and I'm grand. And we're almost so welcoming to the fact is that we don't have this BS meter that goes up when people try to, take something from us. And that's kind of what Trojan's been doing in the last 24 months is really getting companies to educate their team, make their team aware of what's out there, because no matter what systems you put in, people can be bypassed if people are involved.
Peter, if you could just tell us a little bit about Assistech.
Sure. Yeah, listen, thanks very much for having me on. Assistech, perfect analogy of what we do is for as Troy mentioned and Kieran mentioned, so the first step is your two-step authentication, trying to protect your data from the perimeter. And then, as Troy mentioned, what happens, the biggest point of failure is people. So what we do is we look at the actual activity of your employees and use user behavior analytics to try and determine whether their behavior is out of the norm, which would indicate either you have an insider threat or someone's account has been breached. And because we find most of the security risk for small to medium-sized enterprises are based on confidence tricks. Phishing attempts, which people kind of dismiss. Oh, I got one of those silly emails, or someone sending me in, please click this link. And we all think we're immune to it, but it just takes one moment, one error, someone clicking that button, they're giving their credentials away, and then you have these intruders come in with what looks like legitimate access. So we get a baseline of activity of your employees and what they do day to day on your infrastructure, and then determine, is there any deviation from that would alert us to a security breach.
And Peter, that's very people focused. Am I right in saying that a lot of these attacks do need to have an error, a mistake, an error of judgment, an insider, something like that in order to be activated? So therefore, a great many of them, at least, are relying on vulnerabilities in among employees.
Absolutely, and I'd give an analogy to that. Again, going back to Kieran's point about two-step authentication, if you go back to the kind of 90s and the early noughties, we had an epidemic of what were called tiger kidnapping in Ireland, where your criminals had decided or realized that the security in most businesses was getting tighter and tighter. You have security cameras, a security guard on the door, watching who's coming in and out, trying to stop any criminal element coming in. So what did they do? They decided, okay, well, we'll hijack someone and use an impersonation technique to extract whether it was stock or money, whatever it is. It's exactly the same in the cybersecurity world. So that's where we kind of come in around governance as well, is deciding what exactly, not only looking for those abnormalities in behavior, but also trying to reduce the attack surface by minimizing the amount of access your staff have. Now, the human element of that is an awful lot of people say, oh, I had access to all these systems. How come I don't have access anymore? They kind of take it personally. What we try to do is educate them and say, no, we're reducing your personal risk so that if you are tricked, let's use that word, that the damage that can be done through your account is minimized. So that's where we come from.
Kieran, from an organizational point of view, how should companies manage their employees when an attack has occurred?
Well, communication with them is vital. Firstly, part of the preparedness for attack is, can you communicate with your staff offline? So if you lose your system, seriously, do you have their phone numbers stored? Do you have an emergency set of procedures that work in the event of the loss of a system? There's some very well-known cases, and Sony Pictures, for example, in the US, have spoken very openly about how their response to a major attack from the North Koreans, because they were making a movie that the regime didn't like, how the response was hampered by the fact that so much of their emergency response relied on the very network that had just been wiped out by the hackers. So I think that sort of communication aspect is really, really important. I think also, and we saw this in all sorts of ransomware attacks, including particularly and heroically in the HSE case, you're relying on your employees to do very clever improvised workarounds and so forth. But for the long term, and I think Peter and Troy have made some really interesting points about the human element of this. I'm very strongly in favor of a positive culture in security. If you have a good employee who's very good at his or her job, they're good with customers, they're good at strategy, whatever it is they're good at. They're highly competent, capable people. They're not suddenly moronic when it comes to cybersecurity. You're not employing, most employees are not there to do cybersecurity. They're there to do something else, sales, product development, whatever it may be. And if you make it really hard for them, whether the password requirements are too complicated for any human being, whether you're saying to them, we have no real protections here, so it's up to you. You get 300 emails a day, and it's up to you to decide which of them are dodgy and which of them are not. Very, very, none of us actually, including the experts, none of us are infallible when it comes to that sort of thing. So what Peter's absolutely right. Organizations need to have some of those technical controls in place. If you don't have firewalls and basic good cybersecurity, and you're letting these dodgy emails flood in, somebody's going to click on them. Some of your good employees are going to click on them. So it's much better to understand why that's happening. What is the psychology? What are the organizational features? What are the technical features that allows that incident to happen, rather than just blame people? It's fashionable to say people are the weakest link, but I'm not sure that's right.
In the blame game, Kieran, sometimes people who have been subjected to some kind of an attack will tell you a story that they got an email and it said X. And sometimes you're thinking to yourself, I wouldn't have clicked on that. Why did you click on that? And people will have different triggers as to what will draw them in.
Well, sure. But I very nearly fell for a COVID scam because I was tired and it looked good. And as it happened, was spoofing a company by coincidence that I'm a customer of. My former deputy at the NCSC in the UK, who's a world-class technical expert, almost got spoofed by somebody who had successfully spoofed people in the White House. These spoofs are going to happen. So, there are technical features here. Part of it's for government. What are the regulations around being able to do sort of mass texting and so forth, and luring those scams in? But there are also cultural factors. If you end up blaming the individual, you're going to have a toxic culture where people are scared of security. So here's a really bad example of what not to do, but it's happened. It's happened in the US. It's happened in Britain. I hope it hasn't happened in Ireland. You get these things called ethical phishing tests, which are a good idea. They're a good idea. Okay. So what you do is, it's Peter's point about, you play a confidence trick on your staff. You send them an email that looks right. Maybe it's from the boss, and you say, and then you test how many people click on it because it's an elaborate spoof. That's a good thing to do. But when you get the people who click on them, don't go around blaming them, because actually it's quite a good spoof. Try and find out what led them. What were those factors that led them, that led them not to notice that it was a dodgy email. Don't do what some companies have done, which is punish them. There was a ludicrous example where people who'd been working really hard all year, keeping a company going in the pandemic, were offered a fake bonus by their boss and were then punished when they clicked on the link. If you do that, you have turned off people from security for life. Find out what they're doing, find out how you can support them better in their job. Peter's example of what they've got access to and what they don't have access to is a really good example. If you get that right, then you don't restrict people's ability to do their jobs, but you do make your network safer. And the point about who's acting oddly on the internet, his point about, is somebody operating at weird times? Are they downloading massive amounts of data? The technical capabilities to detect that are far more important than, finding some scapegoat to blame. Blaming is toxic in cybersecurity.
And Troy, if you to pare this back, what would you say are among the main things that Irish businesses can do to mitigate their cybersecurity risk?
Richard, is changing almost every month. We talked there's a lot of talk there about email, right? But just 2 weeks ago, one of my CEO clients called me and he said, "This is a great new service that Amazon are offering." And I said, "What new service?" And he goes, "They clean your computer for you." And I go, what do you mean? So he gets a phone call and the phone call says, "This is Amazon. I'm sorry, but that delivery that we had for you tomorrow is going to be a week late. We're apologizing up front." And he goes, "What delivery?" And they said, "Oh, for the kettle." He said, "I didn't order a kettle." And they went, oh, is somebody using your account? We need to transfer you to our fraud department. We'll sort this all out for you. And he started to believe that he was talking to Amazon and they were trying to help him get his account back in order. And it was only when they were in his computer that he rang me to say, "God, I can see the guy on my computer now and he's gone through and he's run scans and everything." And this is a smart, intelligent man who every day is running a business in the multi-million fishing sector. At the end of the day, we've all fallen for these things. I've had my card taken in the street, in the same way, thought it was in a perfectly comfortable place. So, we can see where the technologies are coming into play around protecting people. So we're moving to now, instead of even multi-factor authentication, moving to passwordlessness. So like the iPhone uses your face to authenticate you. And it's this idea of something that you are. So it's your face, your eye, your hand, something that you have, maybe an RFID key, and then something that whether that's a PIN. And so it means that it still makes it easy for the employee to engage with technology, but the employee themselves don't actually know what the passwords are.
And Troy, so, in a situation like that where the person pretending to be from Amazon got access to the computer, I presume they want access to information that would detail bank accounts, perhaps other data that might be of value. How does that person know then whether they got any of that, and what can they do about that?
Well, and that immediately I said to him, it was a laptop. I said, "Close the laptop. The laptop has to come back to my team. We need to contact your banks right away. We need to start making changes." At that point, I didn't know what access they had, but we've had experience. Now, this is third party, so it's not my particular clients, but it's clients of me telling me stories from other clients. And in some of those instances, photographs of kids were taken, right? And then the next call that they got was saying, "We're now selling photographs of your kids unless you pay a ransom." So it wasn't just about, encrypting data. I mean, these are criminals, right? And the stuff can be very scary to people, on the other side of the phone who, Kieran pointed out, like, they're doing their jobs. They're not security experts. They're not tech experts. They're really good at customer relations or whatever it is. And it's our job, I suppose, then, is to minimize, the involvement in tech and security for them. They do have to be aware that, there's issues out there. Like, one of the reasons I would argue too that they do have to be aware is because what we have found, in the last 6 months more, and I don't know if Peter would have found this with his clients, is that they're targeting their personal emails. So they're targeting their personal emails because, like, some of my clients, only maybe 20 people work in admin, so work in the office, and maybe 300 in a factory, but they're getting their pay slips and, HR stuff and other stuff to their personal emails. And all of a sudden then, HR questions are coming into the HR director from the personal email and saying, "Can you, I'm changing my bank account." And there's a lot of things going on that aren't just, in an email format coming in with ransomware on it. And I think the problem is coming at you in so many ways. Brexit happened. Like, I live in Northern Ireland, and within a few days, my wife produced this, phone message to me. DHL's delivering a package, and I'll be honest with you, my wife's on Amazon every day, so I have a DHL every day almost, right? So she goes, "It's now $2.99 like of a charge because of Brexit," and she's clicking on it, and I'm going, "Hold on a second, right? I know you're probably expecting DHL, but that's probably not real. But
yeah,
and
there are so many ways that we can get sucked in, depending on what our habits might be.
Richard? How do you know?
Peter, we're talking there about people, and Troy is talking about the importance of getting the employee people aspect of it right. One of the questions that has come in there, it says, on the back of the Apple update this week, and with so many companies operating remotely and in a hybrid model, how best do you ensure a workforce in a small enough business is aware and engaged with the ever evolving threat?
That's a very difficult question. I'd go back to what Kieran mentioned about a blame culture. Is obviously there's education. There's a number of providers of education for staff around cybersecurity. Having said that, I still would go back to the idea of two things. What can your staff access, and also, are you monitoring their activity? Therefore, because if you're not monitoring their activity, you can't put any intelligence around what's happening. And another thing that I think we haven't touched on too much is, what exactly is it that your business has to lose? So, for example, we dealt with a client who dealt with a large number of credit card transactions, okay? And they had very strict policies about where that information was kept, where all that credit card customer details were kept. And we said, now, are you sure, can you say hand on heart, if it was an auditor and walked in here tomorrow, that all your credit card information is locked down and secure? They said, yes. I said, how do you prove that? Can you prove that? Well, it's here. I said, well, how many data repositories have you got? And they gave us a big, long list of a number of servers and SharePoint sites they had. And I said, is there any of that credit card information residing on any of those data repositories? Said, no. How do you know? So that, again, that's another part of what we do, is we go out and we crawl your data repositories to find out exactly what sensitive data you have out there and what access is there to it. That discovery showed up a number of developers had been copying bits of the credit card information, their batch jobs, out into other areas for testing new applications, and they were open to the entire company. And again, this is what's referred to as shadow IT, where it's difficult for developers. And as Kieran mentioned, you don't want to make people's jobs too difficult, but you will find also that your employees have a tendency to try and go down the path of least resistance, and they will take bits of data and share it amongst themselves. So to make their job easier, to kind of bypass your normal controls.
And Kieran, I just want to bring you in there, because Peter's talking about, again, the people factor. He also mentioned about monitoring what people are looking at and where they're going online. We're now, and we will be talking later on about remote working and working from home. There is a sort of a dichotomy here, isn't there, between data protection, data governance, and people management?
Well, there is. But I think just to pick up some of his points. So firstly, Peter's absolutely right about risk. Not everybody's at risk of the same thing. I remember advising the legal profession in London. If you're doing lots of mergers and acquisitions, then with lots of intellectual property, there's a particular set of risks from the Chinese state, but Russia won't be interested in. If, however, you've got half of the Russian oligarchy on your books, then that's a different type of risk. Oil companies, for example, they might be doing business in Russia, so you can assume everything you're doing there is compromised. So if you've got a bit of sensitive IP, then just lock it down somewhere else rather than apply really expensive protections to the whole thing. But on data, I'm not sure it is much of a dichotomy. I mean, in terms of protections and the question that came in about smaller business protections and the Apple update, I think it's quite interesting because the Apple update is an exception. It's a really, really clever vulnerability. It's for sale, but it will be used to target high profile individuals and so forth. And actually for smaller businesses and so forth, my former American counterpart, a guy called Chris Krebs, had a great line. He said he would go into organizations large and small all the time. and they would say, help us devise our new cybersecurity strategy. And they'd say, you don't really need one. You need Windows 10. Your infrastructure is too decrepit. You're not, these multi-trillion-dollar companies are updating their security all the time, and you're not using the latest version. But so to answer the question about data protection and so forth, there is something around access controls. Peter's absolutely right about that. I mean, some of the most sort of effective attacks over the years have been where a hacker can get in somewhere, at a sort of unimportant part of the network and just roam their way through. That's really, really devastating. There is something around monitoring, but there's something then about that, and both Troy and Peter are part of the solution here. There's something about the actual technological capabilities that you've got underpinning these things. How much of this stuff can you filter out? Because what you want to be doing, I know we talk a lot about employee empowerment and so on. The best way to empower your employees in cybersecurity is A, not to blame them, but B, take away as many cybersecurity decisions from the average employee as you can, as often as you can. And that's the best way of addressing this dichotomy, in my view.
And Troy, when we've talked a little bit about ransomware, for example, where you're locked out of your own systems and then there's a communication that somebody's looking for money, that one's pretty clear cut that something's going on. But otherwise, how might I know if I'm running a business that we have been compromised in some way?
There's loads of different ways. Some of the examples might be your customer has paid you money and you didn't get it, for example. So the customer has been told to change details relating to the payment. Information all of a sudden appears out in the outer hemispheres of the internet. For example, there was a couple of attacks years ago that looked like the first line of the subject would say, "I know your password is," and the password was correct. And then the email went on to say certain things, and so you're sitting there going, "How do they know my password?" And one of the advices when I talk to companies, one of the things I do is say, because it is impossible now, right? People shop online, to buy flights online, tickets online. You have so many online accounts that you use the same password all the time. And then when people see online that a huge company's been hacked, they don't think it is relevant to them. But for example, it is, because if they're shopping with that person and they're using the same password, all of a sudden the hacker has access to their password, their email. Will that then get them somewhere else? Will that get them into another account? So it's very difficult, and I've said it at the end of all the talks I give. I say to them, after saying what I said today, does anybody, right? There's no blame. Kieran pointed out, does anybody want to change their work password? And every one of them puts their hand up, right? And I said, because it is that thing, it has become so impossible. I'm sure, Richard, I mean, you're moving around, you've got your wife, you're saying you're buying everything online. And I suppose more with COVID, everybody is, Deliveroos and Uber Eats and all these things. How does a person remember all the passwords? And then the thing is, then if you get an email and saying, "We know your password is this," now that goes on into more seedy stuff as it goes down. But people obviously react and go, "They're in my computer," So there are tools then that obviously Peter has great expertise in, that you can put in systems that will start to tell you, for example, if data has been moved off the network, which is another way to identify things are going wrong, that there's somebody in the system. So there are a number of points that you can follow along that start to identify, I've got an intruder. And then, the next step is, what do you do about it?
On the question, Peter, of ransomware, we saw with the HSE, inevitably the question was asked, well, are you going to pay the ransom? And always the best advice is that you should not do that. Are you aware, do many businesses end up paying? Inevitably somebody pays, or they wouldn't keep doing it.
They do. I have come across businesses that have paid ransom. Obviously, we're not going to name any names or talk about them, but the ones that haven't, okay? So one of the challenges when you've been hit by ransomware is knowing what data has been hit by ransomware. So for example, it mightn't be feasible to just restore everything on your network from backup from 2 days previously or even a month previously, because you've been hit by ransomware and you're assuming that everything has been encrypted. So again, it's about monitoring, and one of the things we do is, if we identify an account that has been exploited, is we go back with an audit trail over exactly what has that account specifically modified or touched across your file stores, your file repositories, and we can then actually pinpoint exactly what files have been hit, and therefore you can restore those files with a certain degree of loss if work has been done on them, but not looking to pay out this huge ransom, because you don't want to restore your entire infrastructure from a backup taken a month ago, because you're not sure exactly, because that's the other point, you may not be sure exactly when you were hit with that ransomware attack, because they've got more and more intelligent. They used to just come in and they would systematically go through all the files that your account has access to. Now they're picking them off, maybe 2-3 files randomly here and there over a space of a couple of weeks. So again, monitoring, if you have good monitoring in place, a good audit trail of activity from all your user accounts, you can certainly massively reduce that risk and reduce the risk of having to make a payout, because some people have to do it.
And Kieran, for you, what are the most important basic fundamentals that businesses need to think about and get right to protect themselves and minimize risk?
I think there are a set of technical factors. So do you have monitoring, Peter's point? Do you have firewalls? Do you have phishing protections? So that's the first sort of bucket, if you like, technical. The second is organizational. Have you planned for an incident? Do you know how you could survive the loss of a key system? Have you implemented two-factor authentication in a way that's usable and so on? Have you, and this is absolutely crucial if people who haven't really thought about this do one thing, have you started with a realistic risk appraisal? Because you could fantasize to the end of time about the sort of things that might happen. But all business, all good organizational management is about the risks that are most likely A, to happen, and B, cause the most significant harm. So what does that mean for you? Because then all the technical stuff and everything else you do is predicated upon that reasonable risk assessment. And then the third is behavioral or human. For example, are you supporting your staff to do cybersecurity well? Are you doing some of the things such as, are you helping them manage, for example, social media profiles? So some of the attacks have been caused by a clever combination of what you might call human intelligence and technical nous. So as Peter says, some of the ransomware attackers are getting a bit more sophisticated in studying networks and studying organizations before they hit them. How do they do that? Well, sometimes they look at LinkedIn. And I'm not saying people shouldn't use LinkedIn, but if you want to find out, then so-and-so says, I'm the systems administrator for company X, and it's quite a big, important company. And then you go on to some less professional network like Twitter or Instagram, and you find out the name of their pets. And then you find out that they're using their pets as their password, and that they're running their system off the same web-facing service as they're running the whole corporate system. These are all the sorts of red flags. So basically, technical, organizational, behavioral, there's a bunch of basic good practice. Some of it actually costs more time than money, but it's worth it.
When it comes to little telltale signs, Troy, about stuff, I know anytime I've received emails or correspondence that I chose not to open because it just looked all wrong. Grammatical mistakes is often a big giveaway, or have they got more sophisticated and in not having spelling errors and things like that? Is that changing?
It is and it isn't. I suppose we all go back to the emails we used to get 10 or 15 years ago saying, I've won the Nigerian lottery and I just can't do anything with it and pay it to somebody. And I remember, I live up in Donegal and we've Highland Radio, And there was a lady on Highland Radio one day, and she wanted to know from Sean Doherty, how would she go about doing this to claim her money, right? And Sean was saying to her, but it's not real, you know, and she was there going, but it is, Sean. I have the email in front of me, right? You know, the guy's going to give me 10 million if I can help him claim the Nigerian lottery, right? And that was just, they've got a bit more sophisticated than that now. But even in the last week, I've had 3 new people start in my company, and the 3 of them got emails the week they started to say, this is, you know, from me saying, I need you to do a task. Can you come back to me? And there were grammatical mistakes in that. And I think that was the thing that flagged it for them. And that's the bit where I was saying the personal emails, you know, we're seeing it more and more and more, that young people aren't doing 2-factor authentication. They've had, you know, a generic email out there for so long. And, you know, that people are sitting in those and waiting for financial corporate information to come into them, and then, you know, triggering that to use, I suppose it's like what Kieran saying, studying LinkedIn, studying. These attacks are getting much more sophisticated, but there are still ones where you're going to see it. It's silly. My name was spelled Tory instead of Troy in one of them.
Yeah, and Peter, you know, maybe cultural telltale signs. I got a phone call the other day from my broadband provider telling me that my broadband had been compromised. The phone call was an automated message from a woman with an English accent. And it's an Irish broadband provider. It's not to say they wouldn't have an English employee, but it was an automated voice. Again, it just feels all wrong from the start. Are there other telltale signs that you can see?
Yes and no. So there are the obvious ones, as I said, but my best advice is, if you're in any doubt whatsoever, if it's an email, don't respond. If it's a phone call, hang up the phone. And you pick up the phone and call whoever's involved. So if you've got an email from your boss and you have any worries about it whatsoever, pick up the phone. Ask them, did you send this to me? I know that sounds like that's the simple solution. As businesses grow, now we do have solutions that will actually monitor your emails as well and pick out all sorts of strange anomalies technically behind the email before it even gets to you, that'll pick out whether it's a phishing attack or not. But for maybe small business who haven't adopted those solutions, yes, I would definitely say educate your staff to, if they have any doubt whatsoever, even if the email is legitimate, would your manager have any problem with you picking up the phone and asking, was that you? Okay. Is that email okay? You've given me an instruction to purchase something on behalf of the department. I just want to double check that is legitimate. And that would be my advice on that. Sometimes
the old ways are the best. Cybersecurity,
Exactly.
Pick up the phone and ask and find out.
Yeah.
I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much to our panellists, Professor Kieran Martin, to Troy Armour and to Peter O'Connor. Thank you very much for participating and joining us in that. We'll take a break and we'll be back with our third panel discussion on remote working after a short break. Thank you. Welcome back to this AIB Business Leaders Live event where we're talking about unlocking potential through digital. Well, we've had our panel discussion on e-commerce, we've had a panel discussion on cybersecurity, and in many respects now we're going to talk about something that has fascinated so many of us over the last 20 months, and we're fascinated with what will happen in the future, is the whole phenomenon of remote working. And on our panel, I'm joined by Dr. Susan Vroman, who's a lecturer in management at Bentley University. And prior to that, her career in academia, she spent 20 years in strategic human resources management. We're also joined, beside me here, I have Justin Lawless, who's CEO of Intact Software. And we're also joined by Mary Rogers, who's Chief Executive Officer at Galway City Innovation District. You're all very welcome. Susan Vroman, if I could go to you first. At the beginning of lockdown and the pandemic, there's been an extraordinary forced experiment in a way of remote working and home working. Things have moved on a little bit. People were predicting the end of the office. It doesn't look like that now, does it?
No. First off, good morning or good afternoon. I'm coming to you from Boston, and I've been able to keep abreast of global events, and I understand that you're on the verge of doing more of a return in Ireland. What's very interesting is, first off, how people were in the beginning loving this remote work arrangement. They felt that this was amazing, and they were always going to want that. But what we're discovering now is that a lot of people crave the interaction of the office. And in some worlds, like especially in sales, that it's necessary because it's kind of in their beat, it's in their blood. So we're really looking at a verge of hybrid, I think, is more likely than a long-term remote or a long-term in office completely. So a hybrid where some people want to be there for a little of that juice, but at the same time, they want to be able to go home and get some stuff done. We've learned that that's effective. So that's definitely an area that we're moving into more so than that hyper one or the other extreme.
And Susan, in that sort of power dynamic between management and employees, companies were forced to do remote working and home working, employees were. If that's over or coming to an end, why do hybrid at all? And what I mean by that is, who's winning in that discussion? Is it because managers want it, employees want it, or employees want it and managers have to go along with it?
Well, you know, to answer that question, I can take one half step back, perhaps. What we've learned in this pandemic is, and I was joking with Mary a little bit before we got started, but there's no longer making headlines of a child walking into a room because somebody was doing remote. We've all learned that we're human. And this human thing has really picked up. Emotional intelligence is not new, but for our bosses to say, my employees need some space, some time to work. They need to be mindful and get some of their own air. And for the leaders themselves to say, I can be productive and I can take a repose from the hustle and bustle of the office. There's a mutual need, and it's also a personal need of having some space and time to oneself. So that's the ability to be able to greet your children at the bus stop or to help them study for a test. These human needs are really the driver for some of that remote work. But again, the professional drive that many of us have is it's bringing us back to the office. So honestly, this hybrid is a win-win for us as humans. And again, I think this has been refound, if not always known, and made a priority.
Justin, when it comes to the challenges that companies have faced by very quickly having to turn around remote working, just tell us a bit about Intact Software, what you do, and how that has been affected by the last 20 months.
I guess there's two elements of that. So we're very much a technology business. Most of us can work from anywhere at any single time, but our customers are very much in the traditional space, so they tend to be in distribution, wholesale. They tend to be moving goods around, so a lot of physical work. And a lot of their employees are both physical in warehouses, but they're also physical in offices. And the key thing for them is that when the world shut down, and listening to one of the guys earlier, Anthony from PetStop, so a lot of companies had significant decisions to make as to how they were going to, supply inventory to their customers, what way they were going to do it. We've got customers with hundreds of branches, and they need to figure out, well, what's the most efficient way of doing these things? So our business is to provide software that runs their businesses. So we digitize every single transaction, and we make sure that all the side effects of those transactions happen. So accounting happens, inventory being moved around happens, replenishment happens, e-commerce happens. So we found ourselves at the forefront of that, and from a Monday to a Tuesday, we had to enable all our customers to be able to run their businesses from a laptop, which was a big shock for lots of them. Not for us, we were kind of very well distributed at that time anyway, but for a lot of our customers in that traditional space, they needed to get moving quickly. So fortunately, systems enabled them to do that, and that's what we were doing for them all the time.
In the tussle between, and it doesn't always have to be a tussle, but it's a natural tussle in a way between employees and management over things. Neither side always gets exactly what they want. But in that tussle, where do you see the driving force for this new, most likely hybrid working model that we're talking about?
Maybe controversially, I kind of see media playing a lot into this, and I know I'm actually kind of concerned about, and this is not virtue signaling in any way, but I'm concerned about the way things are going. That I think the working from home mantra is kind of divisive in certain ways, because if you look at the landscape of Ireland and the the real estate across Ireland and Irish businesses, you will see that the front of the building has offices, the back of the building has physical workers shipping goods, workshops, engineering stations. So, we have to be conscious that we don't drive the people from the office space home and leave people in the office providing these services for the rest of us. So it's a really important thing to keep teams together. And, we're tribal, we're pack animals. We want to work together and grow together and learn together. I think it's just so important that we're a bit more thoughtful about this instead of saying, okay, everyone work from home. And, it's convenient, but we have to look at convenience versus community and how we work together and how we grow together. So I think we just need to be a little bit more thoughtful about it and as to how we're approaching this.
We can come back to that. I'd like to bring in Mary Rogers here. Mary, we're talking about convenience and community. Tell us a bit about Galway City Innovation District and what's happening vis-a-vis new models of working there.
Good afternoon, everyone. And Susan and Justin are music to my ears. So for us, it is so much more than a desk, right? So the Portershed is a co-working space for innovation-driven tech companies, startups with global ambition. And we've 41 companies, and they vary in size from 1 to 10 members or 10 employees. And that whole piece, that collision space, that peer-to-peer piece, that serendipity at the coffee machine is really what makes the Portershed work. And so for us, the working from home for many of those companies was efficient work time, but the camaraderie was missing. So the hybrid model is definitely for what we see as the future of work. We've seen people slowly return to the office, come in 1 day, 2 days, maybe bring the teams in on a different day, but definitely the future is hybrid. And if anything, we've seen an increase in demand for membership. So we're growing from 100 desks. So we opened up in 2016 with a 100-member supported by AIB back in 2016, and we're moving to 2 new locations, and we'll have close to 400 desks. And I would say the inbound inquiries for that hybrid model has meant that we're at 50% capacity already. So people want to be around people. Like they, particularly, it's interesting what Justin said, because the software engineers, like they like to be around each other, right? And they problem solve, and that's been brilliant. And then they like to go and work. So it's that kind of mixed community space. But yeah, so much more than a desk. I think the community piece is key.
Okay. And Susan, you touched on this earlier where you talked about people want to be around other people and to have the connection. Ultimately, if we're at the beginning of a new phase of work for many people, this hybrid working model, what do you think will be the ultimate criteria as to whether it has worked or not? Will it actually come down to productivity, for example? If productivity isn't up to scratch, it may be abandoned. Or if productivity is absolutely wonderful, then we may see it pushed further by companies that are looking at shrinking the size of the office space they have.
So I was watching earlier, and I really enjoyed a lot of the speakers that you had. I know Carl was talking about we're in a new era of expectations, and Fergus himself was saying that the beginning of this was a heroic work era, and how hard it's been for people to really pull the margins and to do what they were doing in the beginning. I would say that the era that's been this experiment has been basically the era of burnout as well. That there were not a lot of strategic plans to getting into flexible work arrangements, which therefore were hard stop, remote work arrangements. And so there were no boundaries. And I believe that one of the most important things that we're seeing as far as what we're going to have to do now is we're going to have to pull together what in my academic world we call FSSB, which is Family Supportive Supervisory Behaviors. Which blends together so many different things about recognizing that we're people, and we're going to have to make these people go to work, and people need to have breaks. They need to understand when are they on call, when are they not on call. They're going to need to understand what's good enough versus, in the office, you could maybe have somebody look at something three or four times. Now you can't do that. You're submitting work when you want it to be submitted, and you may have an overnight till somebody gets to look at it based on where you physically are. So these boundaries are going to need to be made real in order for us to find success. And this is a family supportive supervisory behavior, even though it doesn't sound like it, because it enables somebody to say, I can turn off my work brain in this era of new expectations. The expectation is also that you get to be a human and go home, even if you're not physically going home.
So in order to avoid burnout, boundaries are going to have to be respected. There's going to have to be quite a lot of rules around what can and cannot happen.
Yes, for sure. And, we also are talking a lot in this era of, we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. Those are some of our rules where we're recognizing diverse needs, diverse drivers, and we're being inclusive in these behaviors. Well, they were adding a B to this here in the States. So it's DEIB, and the B is belonging. And so we're creating these boundaries, not only because we want for people to feel like I can be with my family, but I can be with the company in a strong way, that they're inclusive, that makes me feel like I belong even when I'm not there. And I know that may sound like I'm saying two different things at the same time, but saying to somebody, I give you permission to not start the workday until 8 a.m. is enabling them to have a boundary so that they can be with their family. And then they know when they're coming in, and they know when they're expected to be in fully. And these core working hours, for example, in hybrid, where we're expecting everybody to be online and available between X and Y. And that at the end of the day, our other boundary is this, telling you can have permission to go home and be with your family. Having that set up enables an organization to really run better, so that people feel like they belong where they belong, physically and mentally. And that has been a real key to making this hybrid work.
It's interesting, Susan. I read one article recently, it was in the United States, where it had arisen, where some companies were saying that if you're going to be working from home and you're going to work 3 days a week from home, because you won't have a 1.5 hour commute, can you start 1.5 hours earlier? Because you're going to be at home. Now, I presume that might suit some people as long as they get to finish on the far end of the day at a set time.
Yes, it is. We have found that that's been something that a lot of people started doing, and then they burnt out, because working 10.5 hours or 12 hours a day is too much. I personally have a 55-mile in one direction commute. So if I start working and give myself an extra 1.5 hours in the beginning and an 1.5 hours at the end, my what was already 50, 60-hour work week becomes 70 or more. And I just don't have it in me. So you certainly could do that. But I think that what we're finding is that we're going to have to give people a break somewhere. So if you're expecting them to start work earlier, fine. Let them have a true lunch, workout hour, whatever. Give them a Peloton subscription or something and say, use it. I want to see that you're hitting those marks, because it's important to me that you're getting your health on, or whatever it might be. So yes, you can do that, but please don't. If you're asking me as your consultant, please let your employees have some time, because the morning commute is when you listen to the news, or you listen to a book on tape, or you just connect with your friend who lives in a different time zone, and it's the only quiet time you have to talk. So let them have that time, at least on one end.
Yeah. And Mary, when it comes to the Porter Shed, in a way, it looks like it's a future office model, because it's quite fluid. It's a very flexible situation, and it suits startups in particular. It might not necessarily suit those who think that, working from home means that they can, they're living the dream, and basically I can now locate to wherever I want.
Yeah, so it was a challenge, because I think initially everybody did think I can work from home and I live in the dream. And then, I think through the first 12 months of the pandemic, that was okay, because we had so much else going on in our heads. But I think the remote workers still want to go somewhere, right? So they still want to have the option, and that's where the hubs solve that problem. So for the large corporates who are 100% remote now, they have that option to kind of come into a local hub or come into the Porter Shed and meet people and kind of engage. The 100% from home, I feel there's very few who want. There's a different stage in your life, right, where that works if you've got small kids or you're able to do multiple things, but there is that need still for that community piece and that engagement piece. So we've, like I said, we soft land FDI companies, and we found a number of the corporates asking through like a software called Asana. They've been booking desks so large of the large corporates. Their members are saying, can I come in for 1 day a week or 1 day a month or whatever it is? So there's still that need for connection.
Okay. And Justin, to some extent, a lot of this comes down to efficiency, and what you guys do can help these kinds of working models to come to pass. And is it efficient? Is it a more efficient way or a less efficient, more expensive way for businesses to have employees?
I think that's the key question. And you asked the question earlier on about, is that drive coming from employees or coming from management? We can see enormous efficiencies across our own business by remote working. But that's a short-term, it's a short-termism. And as Susan mentioned earlier on, there's burnout attached to that. There's expectations, then customers have different expectations as well. So it really means that we have to think about this more deeply than we currently are. So I think that, you know, creating tools are a thing of way of getting work done. And when we see new people coming into our business, they have digital tools in order to communicate with people. And for many, many years, we've been told that 90% of all communication is nonverbal. And all of a sudden now we're expecting to force people down a digital pipe to communicate with each other. And it's very, very difficult. New people starting in a business, they need to learn, and they need to learn from the cohorts. Quite often, Irish indigenous businesses, the answers to the questions that employees have don't exist on Google. Google is the person to the right or Google is the person to the left. If they don't have that person, all their interactions are then recorded. So all of a sudden in your chat history, you see, can I ask you another question? Can I ask you another question? And that's very demoralizing for people as well, because it's there plain for them to see. They've once been the person who was the oracle in their previous business, is now become the person that doesn't know those answers. So, you know, digital tools are fantastic, but they also show, fantastic at driving efficiencies, but they also can alienate some people as well. It's not just about the tool; it's about how we interact with people and how we manage people better.
Susan, this really is a new experiment for so many companies, and many, I'm sure, are not totally sure about what's going to happen. For example, when COVID first broke, I remember talking to one SME owner-manager who had about 12 employees, and they told me that all of the employees were at home, they had emptied out the office, and everything was going very, very smoothly, and it had been a revelation. I spoke to another SME owner-manager who employed about 8 people, who said to me, they're all at home, nobody's doing anything. I think they're just out in the garden. The whole thing's a disaster. Now, does that come down to the way they were managing it? Does it come down to their selection of employees in the first place, long before COVID came along?
My goodness, yes. But truthfully, I think that folks have, I think we hired adults. I mean, I think Justin was saying this earlier, we hired adults. And your last panel also was talking about this, with adults who might click on the wrong thing. Adults, we're capable. You hired us because we're smart. You hired us because we know what we're doing, and we'll put the stuff on the table. But if I choose to spend the best hour of the day in the sunlight in my garden, well, am I not allowed to do that? You used to give me a lunch hour to go and do something. So I think that we're very harsh critics when we see what people are doing with their time when it's not what we would do with our time. And I've had so many calls and so many clients, and truthfully, a lot of conferences with people saying, how do I get my people to work the way I would work, is what I've been trying to finish the sentence for them. Folks are probably doing the work. They're not just out in the garden dilly-dallying. And truthfully, we're all been scared. This pandemic is not a joke. So let us all process this in the way that we can. As long as we're delivering the work for you by the deadline that you had, we're working. Maybe we're doing it at night when our children are asleep. Maybe we're doing it in the afternoon when our mothers are doing okay. Whatever it might be, but we're probably doing the work. That's probably happening. But the other half is, there are just some people who, yeah, you did hire who aren't going to work. And maybe they are taking advantage of this. They've always been there. And my hope is that you were managing them before, and you have every bit of permission to manage them now. If somebody is not doing their work, the rest of your team is looking for you to hold them accountable. But maybe not judge the how they're doing it, but if they're doing it, and look for the products that they're delivering before you judge.
And with the hybrid model, Susan, there is a sense of trying to get the best of both worlds by allowing people certain quality of life things around working from home, maybe a little bit more flexibility, while at the same time not losing that human connection that employees have, that creativity and teams. How do you think this will affect hiring policies and how companies approach hiring staff and hiring managers who are going to have to manage those teams in that different way and different environment?
I'm truthfully working on an article right now. I've interviewed a series of chief people officers, talent developers, operators, outplacement firms. And, you know, number one thing is that folks are going to be looking for leaders who can demonstrate empathy, because that is going to be huge. So leaders need to be able to connect with humans. And then there also needs to be the ability to work with tech. Because if you're having, many people are going to be doing interviews, first and second, and maybe even third round interviews here in the States online. It doesn't make any fiscal sense to fly somebody here or to wine and dine them if you're not sure. So they're going to be looking for you to get on a Zoom or a WebEx or a Teams and not be fidgeting. And they're going to be looking for you to understand how to have good lighting or how to mute yourself when you're coughing. And then they may ask you to present, and whatever it's going to be, they're going to look for technical versatility, because that is going to be a necessary must. Because what we will find in hybrid is that, like you were alluding to earlier, we're not all going to be on Zoom in the future. So if you're running a conference call on Zoom, everyone's on Zoom, that we all feel the same. If everyone's in the office, we all feel the same. But our new era is going to be a versatility of using technology with empathy for humans. And that combination is exactly kind of the special sauce that folks are going to look for, and is really going to be a must to be successful in the hybrid economy.
Mary, that hybrid, that ability to do both of those things for managers, I'd imagine will be very sought after, because you could have a situation where an employee is thinking about their boss and they're saying, oh yeah, they're high-fiving me when I go into the office, and they're monitoring how many emails and what activity I'm doing while I'm at home. You know, I'm not buying this. It'd be very difficult to manage.
Yeah, it's interesting what Susan said too, because we've adjusted our space here to accommodate hybrid working. So there's more conference rooms and there's more phone booths, because even if 2 of the team are in the office and 3 are at home, you'll find the 2 employees going into phone booths to make the person at home feel comfortable and not feel disconnected from the team. So we're nearly adjusting the office space to kind of mirror the remote working or the hybrid model, which is nice because it's very thoughtful. And the new technology that we're implementing in the Porter Shed is to accommodate that, right? So we've a lot more phone booths, the podcast studio, all the different collision spaces, so that everyone feels like they're on the same page and they're part of the same team. And the versatility piece is just key for that. But you're right about being able to then adjust to that for the people that are in the office. Like Mortar is one of our companies, and they were formed during COVID. So they were a company that had 2 separate businesses. 2 of the guys here, they met at the coffee machine, and they've completely disrupted the ag tech market. So farmers used to go to the mart and buy a sheep or a cow. Then they couldn't during the pandemic. And these 2 guys, Mark McGann and Kieran, have created Mortar, which is galvanized the gavel, you know, like the auction gavel. So if you go to a mart now, you can bid on a cow from Donegal or Boston, and you have the same access. So I guess the technology in the startups, they've disrupted the marketplace. So now we have much more opportunity to create better solutions and then attract more talent. So now Mortar can recruit people from Boston, from Bulgaria, it doesn't matter. And they can work for them from anywhere in the world. So I think it's really opened up the employee market, which presents challenges for the employers too.
On that point, Mary, as well, there was a sense that remote working would open up new opportunities for rural Ireland, for regional towns, for regional cities, etc. Because in theory, people could live in further away in further places. Part of the counter argument with that is that if it's a hybrid model, they're going to need to get to the office a couple of days a week. That might mean staying overnight if they've decided to live quite a bit away from the office. And the other point that it has raised, people have asked, is will it be a case that if I'm not in the office, I'm going to miss out on things, I'm not going to get promoted as quickly? Or do you think the hybrid model will do away with that?
I think we accept that now. Like, we're coming to a point where all of the efficiencies of working from home and the hybrid model of coming to the office will have to marry. So we know that Connected Hubs has been launched by the department, and there are over 300 hubs across Ireland now that people are going to. And some people are just working from home and then coming to a central location. So LiveScore is a member company here, and they just had their UK team over. So they had 20 employees in the office Monday, Tuesday. But today there's one person from LiveScore in the office. So they just went back to remote working or to their other office spaces and then come together. And we just have to, that connectivity, I guess, like we're talking about Justin was talking about in the chat, is like, is to make sure that we're not singling somebody out or organize an event that is in person if they'll miss out because they're in Donegal or somewhere else. We just have to, it takes more planning, and we're cognizant of where people are. But I think it goes back to hybrid. It's just going to be a mix. I can't see anyone fully working remote all of the time. You do need that touch, or that, the big thing they say here is, I didn't realize you were so tall. I didn't realize you were so small. Like, because they haven't physically seen someone stand up. It's been interesting. It's been an interesting evolution as people come back.
Yeah. I didn't realize you were on crutches, or you'd had that accident. And Justin, technology is key to all of this, because technology opens up the avenues for this to happen. Technology was put to the test during the pandemic and came through it pretty well. But in a future working hybrid model and remote working, somebody's got to carry the cost, perhaps the additional cost of that technology. They need to have systems in the office and have the right systems at home for people as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that Mary mentioned that about we have a policy, one remote, all remote, and that worked perfectly when everybody was at home. But now when you've got a hybrid mix going on, you can have 4 or 5 different people in an area all on the same call, muting microphones. It becomes very, very difficult. And we're actually in this, we're at a moment in time where we're actually moving 3 of our offices because our offices are too small for us now. So we're now actually gone to market now for real estate. And it's probably the best signal of all that people are still quite bullish on the office, because prices for office space hasn't come down. We're not seeing any dips in prices, so it gives you a good idea. So moving offices, we're going to need more space. We're going to need more phone booths, as Mary alluded to earlier on, that people can go in and still do that, those remote calls with people who are remote without disrupting everybody else in the office as well who are on different calls, because if you've got 10 or 12 different calls going on in open plan offices, that's a huge cost and a huge burden that the company's going to end up carrying that at some point. But it makes sense for them, and a longer term benefit for the company is to have their people together, all pushing in the same direction. That's really the benefit of it. So.
Yeah, and Susan, we have one of the questions in here is a question I'll put to you. As a medium-sized business with a workforce beginning a phased return to work next week, how can you foster an inclusive company culture when most people still won't be meeting face-to-face for a while yet?
Absolutely, great question. One of the things that we suggest, we being my colleagues and I, would simply be to make sure that traditions that you have carry through. For example, if you've been doing third Thursday all company status meetings, continue to do the all status meetings as you had, and blend in, your remotes and your homes as you were doing. Don't change the cadence of normalcy because the change is people are coming back in. Continue on the things that you were doing prior to COVID, during COVID. Try to bring those through. There's other elements like the fun things like Taco Tuesdays, where the tacos are being delivered to the office and you can have tacos delivered to somebody's house. I mean, I sometimes find those are kind of hokey, but at the same time, they're good humor and continue to be good fun. And simply the reach out is going to be so important. So before a meeting, if you have a meeting that's going to take an hour, maybe build it for an hour and a half and let people get on and just talk. I mean, I do this with my classes. I teach for an hour and 20 minutes and I budget for 1 hour because I want for the first 10 minutes to just be talk And at the end, I want there to be time for QA. So let people just make conversation to make them feel like they're part of the conversation. Those would be my 3 recommendations. And they don't really cost much, with the exception of some tacos, but you were buying them for everyone in the office anyway.
And Susan, in Ireland, we talked about how we're, having further opening up now, and very shortly we're going to see a lot more people returning to the workplace. So this has been an issue for businesses over the last few months, deciding how they would do it. I'm not saying that there's a best way to do it, but I've heard of one large company that decided to basically do a questionnaire of staff and say, how many of you want to do a hybrid 2 days a week? How many want to do 3 days a week? How many want to do what? People signed up for that. Another largest company took the view that, no, what we're going to do is we're going to have an allocation of space and desks, and people can book those desks when they need or want to come in. And that's a more fluid situation, but it might be one that they would only do for a while to see how it goes. And any thoughts on what's the best approach?
Oh, I wish I had a prescription for you. Boy, would I be rich if I could write it, eh? I believe that each company is doing what's best for their culture in that vein. And if the best thing for the company, and the company can accommodate the survey to try and make it work for as many people as there wants, with would you like to come back 2 days, 3 days, then that's the best thing for their culture, and they know it best. And if a company can do that hoteling system where they're signing up, that's best. My suggestion would be, though, to have something that is the per rigor, or the expectation that's standard. So if you're going to have, if you're going to say you may stay home completely remotely, that's your given. But what is the standard that we will expect that you come to the office? How many days, a month or a quarter? That there should be some expectation. If it's going to be, we're going to let you come back 2 or 3 days a week, but the minimum is 2, then enforce the 2. There needs to be something so that everyone is playing by the same rule book. That would be my one suggestion. But again, let your culture be your driver, especially for this re-entry phase. I think a year from now, we're going to be in another place, I hope, with health. But again, mentally, it's here. Let me just put it this way. Here, we all went, March 13th of 2020 was our day that we all remember. And it took us another month to put masks on. When they told us we could take masks off, it took people a beat to do it. Now people are comfortable, but it took, I'd say, a solid month for people to be ready to take a mask off in a store. So this, just because we're ready to do it next week doesn't mean we're ready to do it. Let's let people get their mental footing, and your company knows its people best, I think. So trust the people who you hired to make those people decisions, and trust what you're hearing and make those decisions on that. I'm sorry, I don't have better prescriptive advice, but that's the best I can offer.
No, that's great. It's very helpful. I want to do a quick straw poll of the 3 of you as to how you plan to work, let's say, in the next 2 to 3 weeks or in 1 month's time. Justin, how have you been working, and what way will you be working in a month's time, vis-a-vis going into office, home, what?
I've been working very much so in our Irish offices for the last 6 months. I booked my first flights to our UK offices this morning outside here, so I'm heading back in the other direction that we were before pandemic. So
you'll be office and travel, and probably not working from home, would you say?
Not so much working from home. I'm more so office and travel. I think we evolved that way, and I think give a few months or so, we'll find ourselves heading back that direction.
Okay. Mary, what about you?
Absolutely, I'm 100% back in the office. Mainly just primarily, I guess, to support the members coming back. And to what Susan said, it's that I always say to everyone, you have to make everyone as comfortable as the most uncomfortable person in the room today. So as they adjust back, I just want to be here to make sure they're comfortable. But yeah, I'm back.
And Susan, what about you?
I'm working with a sense of humor. I'm in a classroom again, in a hybrid version. If there's anyone not feeling well, we must make the accommodation. And some countries had difficult visas, so I teach a hybrid classroom. I go to campus 2 days a week, but all meetings I'm taking and all my office hours are actually remote. Because while I'm comfortable in a classroom with 36 people, my office is like 4 by 3. And honestly, I'd rather have office hours with masks off so I could really talk and use facial expressions. And to do that more comfortably for everybody still, I'm using Zoom. So I do that from home.
So you're going to be doing the true hybrid version. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. I'm conscious of the time. Thank you very much to Dr. Susan Vroman, to Mary Rogers and to Justin Lawless. Thanks for all of my guests and panellists this morning. I hope you have enjoyed the session and hopefully we'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye.